The first time I heard my teacher's voice come through a speaker, it was attached to a cassette recorder the size of a brick. This was decades ago in Kamakura. A visiting monk had brought a tape from his own teacher, one of those old school transmissions people carried like contraband before the internet learned to counterfeit intimacy. The tape crackled. The voice was thin, and yet it had weight. It wasn't the sound quality that mattered. It was the intention inside the sound. That's why the voice on Lin Mei's laptop made my skin crawl. It sounded like Hoshino Ryosen, his rough cadence, his clipped vowels, the little pause he made as if he were refusing to decorate the sentence with kindness. It was familiar enough to slip past the part of my mind that loves continuity. But the cadence was wrong in a way my body recognized before my brain could label it. Like a friend who shakes your hand with the correct grip, but a different temperature. On the screen, the waveform kept moving as Hoshino said in English, "Jonah, you have been appointed." The room stayed very still. Not because we were calm, but because each of us was doing the same private arithmetic. If they can do this, what else can they do? Lin Mei leaned forward, eyes on the waveform as if it were a living thing. "It's modeled," she said quietly. "A high-quality model. They trained it on his Japanese interviews and spliced phonemes into English." Tess's hands were flat on the conference table. Her jaw moved once, then stopped. "They're desecrating him," she said. She didn't use the word lightly. Tess isn't religious, but she believes in consent. This was a theft in the shape of reverence. Noah stood behind Tess, reading the room the way he reads a crowd at a retreat, watching not for the loudest threat, but for the quietest leverage. "This is the plan," he said. "They want you to freeze. They want you to treat your teacher as authority and them as the priest." I stared at the laptop. The voice continued, smooth, measured, using Hoshino's tone like a borrowed robe. "Those who resist guidance do not understand compassion." A familiar technique. Flatten a complex word until it becomes a weapon. Compassion becomes compliance. Guidance becomes control. Resistance becomes immaturity. Lin Mei reached under her desk and pulled out a small audio interface she'd rigged together with the impatience of someone who refuses to be outpaced by a foundation. "I can sample it," she said, "and compare it to your original letter. The voice has artifacts, micro-regularities. It's too consistent." Tess looked at the countdown on Lin Mei's second screen. 002204 until Mercer's scheduled remembering session. "You have 22 minutes, she said. "No pressure." Noah's voice stayed level. "We don't need to prove it to ourselves," he said. "We need to prove it to the witnesses." "Witnesses," Tess repeated, disdain sharpening the word. "I'm so tired of their vocabulary." Jun sat in the corner on the old love seat we'd bought from a law office that had gone under. She was wrapped in a blanket, hands in her lap. She had been listening to the synthetic voice with an expression that wasn't fear exactly, more like recognition of a pattern she'd survived. When the voice said "appointed" again, Jun flinched, and then, carefully, as if she were stepping onto a thin bridge, she spoke. "Not him," she said. The words were plain. She didn't need to explain. Noah looked at her. "How do you know?" he asked gently. Jun's gaze stayed on the waveform. "Real teacher," she said slowly, "doesn't appoint. He removes." It was the clearest sentence I'd heard from her in days, and it was exactly right. Hoshino's authority had always worked by subtraction. He removed excuses. He removed my need to be special. He removed the fantasy that enlightenment was a reward for good behavior. He never appointed anyone. Appointment was for bureaucrats and emperors, not Zen. Tess exhaled once, hard. "Okay," she said. "So we're agreed. We don't let them put words in his mouth." Lin Mei's fingers moved quickly. "I can push our own stream," she said. "A parallel feed. If they mute Calder, we still get our version out. People will screen record anyway." Noah's gaze flicked to me. "You ready?" he asked. The question didn't mean, are you brave? It meant, are you willing to be imperfect in public? That was harder. I reached for Hoshino's actual letter on my desk, the paper that still smelled faintly of cedar and old ink, and held it up. Lineage will speak, I said, echoing Mercer's teaser with disgust. Fine, but not through a ventriloquist. Tess nodded once. Good, she said. Now decide what you're going to do with being watched. I looked at my team. Lin May, already building redundancy. Noah, already anticipating the psychology of the room. Tess, already translating outrage into a plan. Jun, quietly anchoring us in the one language that mattered, what was real. And I felt the temptation Hoshino had warned me about, the desire to fix by becoming the loudest voice. Mercer wanted me to become a character, a repentant operator, a reluctant prophet, a man who finally admits his guilt on camera, a cautionary tale that ends with civic obedience. If I played that role even in resistance, I would be inside his script, so I chose the only move that felt genuinely oppositional. I would refuse to be the center of meaning. Lin May, I said, make the evidence visible. She didn't ask what I meant. She nodded and began pulling up the images she'd taken of the envelope, forwarding labels, microdot analysis, printer serial numbers, lease records. Data that looked dull until you understood it was the signature of a hand. Tess, I said, your donors. She already had her phone out. On it, she said. I'll make sure the room is full of unofficial witnesses. Noah, I said, watch the watchers. He nodded. And you, he said, don't debate, don't sermonize, don't correct them into more authority. I know, I said, though knowing and doing are different species. The synthetic voice continued on Lin May's laptop, building a gentle cage out of Hoshino's tone. When you are called, you must answer. I looked at the countdown. 19 minutes. I sat in the chair facing our own camera, cheap by studio standards, good enough for truth, and waited for Lin May's nod. She glanced up. We're live, she said. No intro music, no graphics, no dramatic lighting. Just my office above the marina, the bay behind me, a letter in my hands, and a team of people who had decided that consent still mattered even when power got bored. I spoke. My name is Calder Rowan, I said. Some people call me Jonah. If you're watching this because you were invited to a remembering session, I want you to know something before the show begins. I held up Hoshino's letter so the camera could see the brushstrokes, the red seal, the date. This arrived today, I said. It was written in 2015 by my Zen teacher in Japan. He's dead. If you hear his voice on a stream tonight, it is not him. I let that sentence sit, not for drama, for comprehension. Behind me, Lin May put a slide on the screen capture, the microdot pattern decoded into a printer serial number. This is the envelope it came in, I continued. It was forwarded multiple times. The most recent label was printed on a machine leased by Harbor Light Philanthropies. I didn't say gotcha. I didn't say caught. I said the plain thing that could be verified. Tess's voice came from off-camera, clipped and grounded. Say the serial number, she whispered. I did. Printer serial 4K 7-19-M1, I said. Lease address, Pier 70, San Francisco. Noah's voice, quieter. Don't accuse. Let the fact accuse. I nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then went on. My teacher wrote me a warning, I said. It's not a blessing. It's not an endorsement. It's not appointment language. It's a question. And it's the only question that matters tonight. I unfolded the letter fully, hands steady, and read the line we'd all been circling since it arrived. You are fighting false teachers without asking who appointed you. I looked at the camera. If someone is about to tell you that this line means I should lead you, leave the stream, I said. If someone is about to tell you that my guilt is proof of my authority, leave the stream. If someone is about to tell you that obedience is compassion, leave the stream. I paused. Stay for evidence, I said. Don't stay for a performance. Lin Mei put up another slide, a side-by-side audio analysis, spectrograms of Hoshino's recorded Japanese voice and the synthetic English. Little regularities, the uncanny smoothness of the model. Not proof that would convince a jury, but enough to make a thinking person hesitate. I didn't ask the audience to trust me, I asked them to doubt the channel. Some of you were invited by Harbor Light, I said. Some of you donate to consciousness research. Some of you believe this is civic resilience. I'm not here to argue your motives. I'm here to remind you that every system that claims to protect you also wants something from you. I held up my hands, palms visible. An old interrogation trick in reverse. If you want to know what my teacher would have said about that, I said, here's his sentence. I read another line, short, blunt. Soft voice is sometimes the sharpest knife. Then I lowered the letter. And now, I said, I'm going to do something that will disappoint people who want a hero. I looked down for a moment, not theatrically, but because I needed to be honest. I don't get to appoint myself as anyone's protector, I said. My job is not to replace gurus with skepticism. My job is to return people to their own agency. Noah exhaled softly. Tess said nothing. Lin Mei kept recording. If you've been in a cult, I continued, you already know the danger of appointment. The day someone gives you a title is the day they own part of your mind. Sometimes the title is sister. Sometimes it's awake. Sometimes it's skeptic. The label doesn't matter. The mechanism does. I glanced at Jun. She was watching with fierce attention, as if language itself were a rope she was learning to climb back up. I'm going to stay off the official stream tonight, I said. Not because I'm afraid, because I'm not willing to be used as a prop for civic obedience. I let that sit, then added one more fact. If you see a remembering session that claims I'm participating, I said, ask yourself why the platform needs my face. I reached forward and turned off our camera. Lin Mei kept recording anyway. Her rig was set to capture everything regardless of what the feed did. That was her version of faith. For a moment, the office was quiet except for the hum of devices and the faint sound of the marina outside. Tess broke the silence. That was annoyingly principled, she said. Noah's mouth moved in something like a smile. It was operational, he said. Lin Mei looked up from her screen. They're reacting, she said. On her monitor, the Harbor Light stream link had gone live earlier than scheduled. The thumbnail appeared, a still image of me in a chair. Not in my office, in their studio. My face lit differently, my posture subtly wrong, the same suit, the same hair, close enough to fool a casual viewer. And beside the thumbnail, the caption, Calder Rowan, live. Deepfake, Lin Mei said flat. They're running a model of you. Tess's laugh was sharp and humorless. So they really don't need you, she said. Noah leaned over Lin Mei's shoulder. They need your trust, he corrected. On the screen, Hoshino's voice continued, calm and false. Then I spoke. My own voice, modeled, telling the audience I had been appointed to guide civic stability. Jun made a small sound that might have been a sob or might have been disgust. Lin Mei's fingers flew. I can't stop their stream, she said. Too many mirrors, but I can flood the channel with proof. I can inject our evidence into the same social graph. Tess was already dialing. I'm calling the journalists, she said. The careful ones. The ones under NDA. I'm going to tell them they're being played. Noah stared at the deep-faked me on screen, expression unreadable. This is what they wanted, he said. Not compliance. Confusion. If nobody knows what's real, the system becomes the only refuge. And the system is Mercer, Tess said. Lin Mei nodded once. And Harbor Light, she added. And anyone who benefits from people giving up the burden of interpretation. I watched my synthetic self speak with my mouth, and I felt something odd. Not panic, not rage, but a kind of clinical grief. It wasn't personal, it was structural. A machine had learned the shape of my face well enough to use it against strangers. Hoshino had said, when the bell rings, Do not look for the one who rings it. Listen. This bell wasn't a sound, it was a feed. And what it was saying with perfect calm was, meaning is ours now. Noah turned to me. You still want to quit? He asked. The question surprised me. I looked at him. Because, he continued, this is where quitting becomes moral. Tess glanced up, eyes sharp. Lin May paused her fingers for the first time in an hour. I understood what Noah meant. Quitting now would be a form of surrender to the narrative that the machine owns authority. It would concede the terrain. But continuing in the old way, taking cases, exposing gurus, dismantling small cults, would not touch the deeper mechanism. Mercer wasn't building cults anymore. He was building a world where cult dynamics could be packaged as public health, and I, whether I liked it or not, had become part of the demonstration. No, I said, I'm not quitting. Tess nodded, satisfied. Lin May went back to work. Noah didn't react, but his posture changed in a way I recognized. Alignment. I continued more quietly. But I'm changing. That was the first honest sentence I'd said all day. The Necessary Skeptic. 2 weeks after the deepfake stream, I walked into a co-working space in Oakland and heard my own words recited like scripture. I didn't go there because I wanted to be a myth. I went because Tess followed a line item from Harborlight to a new non-profit with a name that sounded harmless enough to be a therapy app. The Skepsis Civic Lab. Their mission statement, pulled from their website, read like a public grant proposal. To inoculate communities against high-control belief systems through evidence-based skepticism training and nervous system resilience protocols. Inoculate, training, protocols, resilience. A health vocabulary built out of coercion's old bones. Tess found their filings first. They're small, she told us, tapping her pen against a Form 990 printout. But they're connected. Their seed funding came from a donor-advised fund linked to Harborlight, and their vendor contracts are with Kethra. Lin May confirmed it digitally. Same infrastructure, she said. Same device handshake, same back-end analytics. They're running the cult stack without the cult branding. Noah said something that stuck with me. They're building an anti-cult cult. He wasn't being clever. He was being accurate. What Skepsis offered wasn't robes or rituals in the obvious sense. It offered relief from ambiguity. It offered a social identity for people who had been burned by belief. Survivors are vulnerable to anything that promises them they will never be fooled again. Skepsis promised exactly that. They called their practice Necessary Skepticism. They ran integrity circles. They offered debrief pods where members could process external influence before speaking to family. They also had an icon. Me, not Calder Rowan, private investigator in Sausalito, not Jonah, old call sign buried in a manual drawer. Their icon was a hybrid, a man who had resisted gurus, exposed systems, refused appointment, therefore in their eyes, the only person safe to trust. They called him the Necessary Skeptic. They never invited me. They didn't need to. My refusal was part of the mythology. Absence is oxygen to a certain kind of devotion. Noah volunteered to go in first. Don't, Tess said immediately. Noah looked at her calm. I'm the one who can, he said. Tess's mouth twisted. That's what everyone says right before they get caught, she replied. Noah didn't argue. He simply said, I'll be careful. Lin May built him a clean phone, stripped of everything but what he needed. Tess gave him a cover story, survivor advocate, frustrated with the chaos of traditional therapy. Noah didn't need much acting. He could be believable in almost any system because he had once believed in a system himself. I watched him leave and thought about Hoshino's fox parable. The person who wants to catch the fox becomes a fox. I was not eager to watch Noah become anything else. He returned 2 days later with a notebook full of phrases he'd written down like a linguist. Listen to this, he said, and read from the page. Emotion is unverified data. Compassion is accountability. Family is often the first cult. Verification is love. If you feel offended, the system is working. Tess stared. That last one, she said. That's straight out of every cult handbook. Noah nodded. They've turned doubt into identity, he said, and identity into discipline. Lin May asked the question she always asks. Who benefits? Noah's answer was immediate. Mercer, he said, but not only Mercer. Everyone who wants to outsource judgment to a protocol. I went anyway, not as Calder, not as Jonah, just as a man in a grey sweater, no ring, no badge, no role. The co-working space looked like 100 other Bay Area spaces, reclaimed wood, Edison bulbs, potted plants, the aesthetic of warmth manufactured on a lease. The room where Skepsis met was behind a glass wall. On the wall, a printed slogan, "Certainty is a drug. We choose clarity." Clarity, the same word Sable used, the same word Mercer used, the same word every guru uses when they want to make obedience feel like adulthood. Inside, about 20 people sat in a circle. Some were young, some middle-aged, a few older. Several had the posture of people who have recently escaped something and are trying not to show their fear. Survivors have a distinct alertness, the eyes that keep scanning even when the room is safe. A woman in her 30s facilitated. She had cropped hair and the calm voice of someone trained in group therapy. She wore no obvious jewelry except a mat band on her finger. Different design, same concept. An anchor band, they called it. I'm Mira, she said. Welcome to Integrity Circle. No chanting, no bows. Just a welcome that sounded like professional care. On a low table in the center was a stack of laminated cards. Each card had a phrase on it, a script disguised as guidance. Mira held up the first card. Tonight's prompt, she said, is from the Necessary Skeptic. A few people smiled as if hearing a beloved author quoted. Mira read, reverent. You don't need a guru to start a cult. You just need someone people trust. My sentence, my warning, used as an invitation. Mira continued. Let's unpack what Jonah meant, she said. Jonah, not Calder. They used the call sign like a private intimacy, like they'd earned it. A man in the circle spoke. He meant trust is the vulnerability, he said. So we must trust only systems, not people. A woman nodded. That's why Skepsis works, she said. It's not about personalities, it's about protocols. Mira smiled. Exactly, she said. Protocols protect us from charisma. I watched them and felt an odd mixture of admiration and dread. They were right about the danger. They were wrong about the remedy. A young woman spoke next, voice careful. I tried talking to my mom, she said, and she said I'm paranoid. That Skepsis is another cult. She doesn't get it. Mira's voice softened. Family often can't handle your clarity, she said. They benefit from your old confusion. The young woman's shoulders lowered, relief visible. Relief again. The product. Another man spoke. My brother keeps telling me to just relax, he said with contempt. He's basically asking me to go back to sleep. Mira nodded. People will try to pull you back into noise, she said. Noise, the sutra's favorite word. I felt my stomach turn. They weren't quoting Mercer directly. They didn't need to. The vocabulary had migrated. Mira held up another card. Integrity check, she said. Everyone share one external influence attempt you encountered this week. Around the circle, people reported influences, a friend's skepticism, a therapist who asked them how they felt, a family member who cried, a co-worker who invited them to church, a partner who asked them to stop attending Skepsis sessions. Each report was treated as evidence. Each was reframed as an attack. When someone hesitated, when a woman said, maybe my wife was just worried, Mira smiled kindly and asked, is that verified? The woman blinked. She began. Mira's voice stayed gentle. Worry can be love, she said, or it can be control. In Skepsis, we don't guess. We verify. The woman nodded slowly, gratitude returning. Her wife's worry became suspect. The group became safer. That's how it works, safety built by narrowing. I sat in the back, quiet, and listened as my own warning was turned into a mechanism of belonging. I watched people who had been manipulated learn to manipulate themselves, willingly, for relief. No one in the room looked deranged. They looked cared for. That was the problem. After the circle ended, people lingered in clusters. They spoke softly, exchanging numbers, planning debrief pods. I stood to leave. Mira intercepted me near the door. "Hi," she said friendly. "First time?" "Yes," I replied. She smiled. "Welcome," she said. "What brought you?" I could have lied. But lying would have made me part of the system. "I'm curious," I said. Mira nodded approvingly. "Curiosity is clean," she said. The phrase landed like a chill. Clean, hygiene, protocol, the language of purity. "Do you know who funds you?" I asked. Mira's smile stayed in place. "We're donor-supported," she said. "Community-funded." "Kithara?" I asked. Her eyes flickered, not fear. Recognition of a term she hadn't expected from a newcomer. "We use a vendor," she said carefully. "And Harborlight?" I asked. The smile softened into something firmer. "We don't focus on conspiracies," she said. "That's old-world thinking. Skepsis is about internal clarity. Internal clarity, internal silence, stillness index, same architecture, new wallpaper." I nodded once and left. Outside, the air smelled of rain and car exhaust. The city noise felt almost medicinal after the room's curated calm. Back in my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. The thought that arrived was not dramatic. It was almost banal. This is my fault. Not because I had started Skepsis. I hadn't. Not because I had intended to become an icon. I hadn't. But because I had underestimated the most predictable human hunger, the desire to be safe from being fooled. In trying to dismantle gurus, I had offered people another kind of authority, the authority of the skeptic. And skepticism, when turned into identity, is as intoxicating as belief. The ancients knew this. Pyrrho, the early skeptic, didn't teach skepticism as a weapon. He taught it as suspension, epiche, a refusal to claim certainty in a world that never offers it cleanly. Sextus Empiricus wrote skepticism as inquiry, not ideology. But modern skepticism often becomes something else, a badge, a tribe, a guarantee that we are the ones who see. You don't need a guru to start a cult. You just need someone people trust. And people had started trusting the man who had built his career on not trusting anyone. Rosa finds the rope. Tess didn't wait for my report. She already had her own. She met us in the office the next morning with a stack of papers and an expression that suggested she'd slept about 45 minutes and spent the rest of the night arguing with the tax code. "They're funded," she said without preamble. "By Harborlight," Noah replied. Tess's smile was sharp. "Of course," she said. "But more specifically, they're funded by Harborlight through 3 layers of respectability." She spread the papers on the conference table like a dealer laying down cards. "Harborlight grants money to a donor-advised fund," she said. "That fund gives to a community resilience non-profit in Sacramento. That non-profit then issues micro-grants to Skepsis Civic Lab." She tapped the final sheet. "And Skepsis pays Kithara. Kithara pays Tidewell. Tidewell develops the anchor bands. Everything comes home." Lin May leaned in, eyes scanning. "Microgrants are hard to track," she said. "Not for me," Tess replied. "They tried to hide it with words like mental hygiene and post-influence recovery. But the numbers don't lie. Money has no spirituality." Noah asked the question that mattered. "What's Mercer's role?" he said. Tess pointed at a line item in a meeting agenda she'd obtained through a board member's careless email. "Keynote at Harborlight Symposium next month," she said. "Topic, Skepticism as Public Health. Guest, Mira Kessler." I felt my hands go cold. Lin May looked up. "Mira," she said, "that's the facilitator." Tess nodded. "She's not just a facilitator," she said. "She's being positioned." Noah's voice was quiet. As what? He asked. Tess's answer was immediate. As the humane face of civic control, she said. As the person who tells the public, we're not cults, we're protection. I stared out the window at the marina. A pelican skimmed the water with indifferent grace. The world kept behaving like itself. Inside, we were watching a machine build a new layer. Lin Mei said, we could expose the funding. Tess snorted. People don't leave systems because of spreadsheets, she said. They leave when the system stops feeling clean. Noah nodded. Or when it costs them someone, he said. He turned to me. This is the inward case, he said softly. This is you. I didn't argue. The hardest cult to dismantle is the one that uses your face without your consent. Not because it flatters you, though it does, and that's its own poison, but because it forces you to confront a truth you can usually avoid. People will build meaning out of you whether you want it or not. It's what Weber called charismatic authority, except in this case, charisma wasn't a roaring leader. It was the aura of refusal. The man who rejects cults becomes, paradoxically, the safest figure to follow. Mercer understood that better than any guru. He didn't need to turn me into a saint. He needed to turn me into a proof. You can't expose a machine when you're already inside it, he'd said. He'd been right about the machine. He'd been wrong about exposure. Exposure isn't only about sunlight, it's also about removing the mirror. If Skepsis needed my image as a stabilizer, then the fastest way to damage the system wasn't to attack Skepsis directly. It was to ruin my usefulness as an icon. Tess watched my face. Don't do something noble and stupid, she said. Noah added, no martyrdom, in the same tone he used when he said no speeches. Lin Mei quieter. You can't disappear. They'll mythologize your absence. Jun sat on the love seat, listening. She looked smaller today, the way survivors sometimes do after the adrenaline fades. But her eyes stayed awake. Make messy, she said. We all turned toward her. Jun's cheeks flushed with the effort of speaking. They make clean, she continued slowly. You make messy truth. Tess blinked. She's right, she said, and her voice had a rare note of respect that wasn't ironic. Noah nodded once. Messy truth breaks protocols, he said. Lin Mei's mouth moved slightly. Messy is hard to model, she murmured, already thinking in terms of deepfakes and scripts. I looked at Jun. Say it again, I asked gently. Jun took a breath. They want perfect Jonah, she said. You show, not perfect. Not perfect, not appointed, not clean. Hoshino would have approved. I stood. Okay, I said. We make it messy. The dismantling. We didn't storm Skepsis. We didn't confront them in a parking lot. We didn't leak a dramatic expose with a montage of bank transfers and ominous music. We did something quieter and more effective. We broke the mechanism that made Skepsis feel safe. Step one was money, because money is the skeleton under every moral costume. Tess filed formal complaints with the state charity regulators, not as a crusader, but as a citizen with documentation. She highlighted the donor-advised pass-throughs, the vendor conflicts, the suspiciously synchronized grants. She didn't say cult. She said self-dealing, undisclosed related party transactions, misrepresentation of donor intent. Regulators don't raid compounds, but they do hate paperwork that smells wrong. Step 2 was infrastructure, because modern cults don't meet only in rooms. They meet in recommendation engines. Lin Mei mapped Skepsis's digital ecosystem, their Slack-like channels, their encrypted pods, their onboarding flow. She found the fingerprint she'd been expecting, Kithra's analytics tags embedded in every page, the same silent telemetry used by Stillness Index and Unbroken. Different branding, same machine. She didn't hack for spectacle. She gathered proofs, screenshots, packet captures, code snippets, and packaged them into a public technical report written in plain language. She removed drama and kept the facts. She posted it under her own name. Tess hated that. You're painting a target on your back, she said. Lin May's response was calm. Targets already exist, she said. Visibility is sometimes armor. Noah did the hardest part. He went back into skepsis and spoke to people as if they were human instead of members. He didn't argue, he asked questions. How many friends have you stopped calling since you joined? When was the last time you changed your mind here without apologizing? Why does every verification end with less contact? He listened to answers that sounded like relief, and he didn't shame the relief. He just named the cost. One night he came back to the office and sat at the conference table without speaking for a long time. Finally, he said, "They're not malicious." Tess rolled her eyes. "No one is malicious in their own story," she said. Noah looked at her. "I'm not absolving them," he replied. "I'm saying we can't dismantle this by treating them like villains. They're building a home. It's just a home made of rules." Lin May added, "Rules that make leaving feel like sickness." Noah nodded. "Exactly," he said. "If you question the protocol, you're under influence. If you miss your family, you're relapsing. They've pathologized yearning." John from the love seat whispered, "No, why?" Noah looked at her, grateful. "Yes," he said. "Same move, different language." My part was the most uncomfortable. I had to confront skepsis directly, not as an enemy, but as a mirror. Mira Kessler announced, with quiet fanfare, that Skepsis would host a public event in San Francisco. The Necessary Skeptic, a conversation about freedom. My name was on the promotional poster in small text, not as a speaker, but as an inspiration. They knew better than to claim I would attend. They didn't need attendance, they needed association. Tess tried to talk me out of going. "You show up, you validate them," she said. Noah offered a different warning. "You show up, they'll frame you," he said. Lin May's voice was pragmatic. "If you don't show, they'll play a deepfake of you," she said. Jun said nothing. She watched me, waiting. I decided to go anyway. Not to confront, not to rescue, to refuse the icon. The event was held in a renovated church, ironic, though I doubt the organizers knew. The Bay Area loves repurposed sanctuaries. It's how we reassure ourselves that the sacred can be managed. People filed in quietly, well-dressed, carrying notebooks. On stage, a lectern and a screen. The screen displayed Skepsis' slogan in clean font, "Trust less, live more, a new kind of creed." Mira stood at the lectern, calm, articulate, radiating professional empathy. She looked like the kind of person you'd trust with your grief. That's why Mercer had chosen her. She began with a short talk about influence, trauma, the attention economy, and the dangers of charismatic leaders. She cited Weber. She cited modern neuroscience. She referenced cult patterns without naming cults. She sounded reasonable. Then she said, "And now we honor the work of the Necessary Skeptic." A few people applauded softly, not wild devotion, polite reverence. Mira continued. "Jonah has shown us that you don't need a guru to be controlled," she said. "You just need to outsource your judgment. Skepsis exists to return judgment to you through protocol." Protocol again. Always protocol. On the screen behind her, a video began to play. My face appeared, not a deep fake this time. Actual footage from interviews clipped into a montage. Me saying words like agency, manipulation, noise, relief, choice. Cut tight, stripped of context, stitched into a narrative I wouldn't have chosen. I watched the audience watch it. Some nodded. Some looked moved. A few looked like they were seeing a father figure for the first time. Then my image on screen said my own warning. You don't need a guru to start a cult. You just need someone people trust. Mira smiled warmly. Exactly, she said, which is why Skepsis does not ask you to trust a person. That line should have been the end. It wasn't. Mira added, but we do honor the person who helped us see this. Jonah, wherever you are, thank you. Applause again. And then she said softly, and now we begin the integrity check. A hush. Mira asked everyone to stand, place a hand on their chest, and repeat a pledge. I will verify. I will resist influence. I will not return to sleep. I felt something in the room change. This was no longer a talk. This was a rite. No robes. No chanting. Still a rite. That was my cue. I stood from the back row and walked down the aisle toward the stage. People turned. A ripple went through the room. A few mouths opened. Someone whispered my name, not Calder, not Jonah, but Necessary Skeptic, as if that were my species. Mira saw me and froze for half a second, the only crack in her composure all night. Then her smile returned, brighter now, trained. Jonah, she said into the microphone, voice trembling slightly with what sounded like reverence. You're here. The room leaned towards me. This was the trap, the moment where the icon becomes flesh and the flesh becomes proof. I stepped onto the stage without taking the microphone. Mira offered it. I didn't accept. I looked out at the room, faces eager, anxious, grateful, guarded, survivors and seekers wrapped in skepticism like a coat. I spoke without amplification. My voice carried enough. The church acoustics helped. I'm not Jonah, I said. I'm Calder Rowan. Mira blinked. She held the microphone closer to herself, as if my refusal might infect it. I'm not your skeptic, I continued. I'm not your protection, and I'm not your permission. A few people shifted uncomfortably. That discomfort was important. It meant the spell was slipping. Mira smiled, still warm. Of course, she said into the mic. We don't appoint— Yes, you do, I said, interrupting her gently. Not to dominate, to stop the script. Mira's smile faltered, then recovered. We offer protocols, she said. Protocols are not appointment. I looked at the audience. If you're repeating a pledge, I said, you've already joined something. Ask yourself what it costs. Someone in the front row spoke, voice loud with indignation. Skepsis saved me, he said. I nodded. I believe you, I said. Relief can be real. Mira seized on it. Exactly, she said. We provide relief without deception. I turned toward her for the first time. Do you know who funds you? I asked. Mira's smile held, but her eyes sharpened. We're community-supported, she said. I looked back at the audience. Skepsis Civic Lab receives money routed through Harborlight, I said. Harborlight funds the same vendors that built the rings, the streams, the retreat infrastructure. Mira laughed lightly into the mic. Conspiracy, she said, and the word was honeyed, dismissive. I didn't argue. I gestured toward the side of the stage. Lin May stepped into view with a small projector and a laptop. She didn't speak. She simply displayed documents on the screen behind Mira. Grant records, vendor contracts, the Kithera tags in Skepsis's code, the microgrant pipeline Tess had traced. Tess stepped beside Lin May, holding a folder like a weapon made of paper. Mira's face changed then, not fear, not rage, calculation. The moment her role as facilitator collided with the reality that evidence doesn't respond to tone. Noah stepped onto the stage last, not as an enforcer but as a witness. He stood quietly, hands at his sides, making no attempt to claim authority. I spoke again, still without the mic. I'm not here to destroy your group, I said. I'm here to tell you something you already know in your body. If your protocols lead you away from your relationships, the protocols are not protection. They're isolation. Murmurs. A few people looked down as if realizing how many calls they'd stopped making. Mira tried to regain the frame. This is an influence attempt, she said into the mic, voice calm. We must verify. I looked at her. Listen to yourself, I said quietly. You've built a system where questioning your system is evidence of contamination. A woman in the second row spoke, trembling. That's not true, she said, then hesitated as if afraid of saying too much. Noah stepped forward slightly. Not dramatic, just present. I was inside, he said, voice low. I came here as a participant. I watched how verification worked. Every time someone expressed doubt, the group interpreted it as influence. That's not skepticism, that's immunology turned into dogma. Mira's face stayed composed. We are protecting people from manipulation, she said. Tess finally took the mic from Mira's hand. She didn't ask permission. Tess has never asked permission from a fraud. Her voice filled the room sharp and clear. Protection doesn't require lying about your funding, she said. Protection doesn't require monitoring people's bodies with vendor hardware. She held up one of the anchor bands. And protection sure as hell doesn't require pledges. Mira's voice tried to interject. Tess spoke over her with the calm fury of a woman who'd been streamed like content and refused to be polite about it. If you're here because you were hurt by a cult, Tess said, you deserve care. You deserve therapy. You deserve community. You do not deserve to be recruited into an ideology of suspicion funded by the same people who built the traps you're fleeing. Silence. Not the engineered kind. The kind that happens when a room is forced to look at itself. Jun stood at the edge of the stage, small, wrapped in her blanket. She didn't speak often in crowds, but she stepped forward and said one sentence, simple enough to cut through every theory. Let them ask why, she said. And then she looked at the audience and added, halting but fierce, if no why, then yes is not yours. The sentence hit like a bell. I watched faces change, not all. Some people's eyes hardened, already retreating into defense, but enough. Enough for cracks. Mira's composure finally slipped, not into rage, into contempt. You're doing the very thing you warn against, she said, voice sharp now. You're using your authority to dismantle what you didn't build. I nodded. Yes, I said. That's why I'm not asking you to trust me. I stepped closer to the edge of the stage, facing the room. Here is what I am asking, I said. No pledges, no protocols, no titles, just 3 questions you can ask yourselves and each other. I held up 3 fingers. 1. Are you allowed to leave without being labeled? 2. Are you allowed to disagree without being pathologized? 3. Does this community make you more connected to your life? Or does it make your life smaller? I paused. If you don't like the answers, I said, you already know what to do. Noah spoke softly beside me. And if leaving feels impossible, he added, you're not weak. That feeling is the system. Lin May projected one final slide, a simple document titled Skepsis Exit Resources. Free counseling hotlines, survivor networks, legal aid, trauma-informed therapists. Not a new group, not a new ideology, just doors. Tess didn't smile. She didn't need to. She looked out at the room like a judge who'd delivered the sentence and now refused to gloat. Mira stood at the lectern, face pale. This is sabotage, she said. No, I replied. This is consent. I stepped back from the edge of the stage. Then I did the one thing I hadn't expected to do. I picked up the microphone. The room held its breath. People wanted a decisive moment, a confession, a declaration, a new pledge. I could feel how easily I could become what they were hungry for, the anti-guru guru who tells them what to do with their fear. Hoshino's question rose again. Who appointed you? I answered it in the only way that felt honest. I appoint myself, I said into the mic, voice steady, to one job only, returning people to choice. I paused. And because I can't guarantee I'll do that perfectly, I continued, I'm also doing this. And I turned and handed the microphone to a woman in the front row who had looked unsettled from the start. A survivor, you could see it in the way her hands stayed close to her body. You speak, I told her, not me. She stared at me, stunned. The gesture was not symbolic. It was structural. It broke the frame. The woman lifted the mic with trembling hands and said, in a voice that surprised even her, I don't like the pledge. A few people laughed softly. Relieved laughter, not mocking. Mira looked like she might interrupt. She didn't. The room had shifted. The facilitator no longer owned the air. Another person stood, then another. Questions began. Not to me, but to each other. Why are we funded by Harborlight? Why do we wear these bands? Why do we call family the first cult? Why can't I talk to my therapist without reporting it? It wasn't a revolution. It was messiness. And messiness, as John said, is hard to turn into protocol. We left the stage while the room argued with itself. Not because we were finished, but because staying would have made us central again. Outside the church, Tess exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. That, she said, was satisfying. Noah looked at her. It was incomplete, he said. Tess shrugged. Everything is incomplete, she replied. At least it was honest. Lin May checked her phone. Harborlight's account is already spinning, she said. They're calling it misinformation. Noah nodded. Of course, he said. I watched people leaving the building, faces unsettled, some angry, some thoughtful, a few crying quietly as if realizing that they'd joined something because they were lonely and afraid, and now they had to find their own way again. Freedom is rarely cinematic. It looks like confusion and a long walk home. John stood beside me, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at the night sky as if checking whether the stars were still there. Good, she said softly. It was the only praise I wanted. The message. Mercer didn't call. He didn't need to. People like Mercer let systems deliver their satisfaction. The message arrived as an email sent to an address I hadn't used publicly in years, one I'd kept for old contacts and necessary secrets. Subject line, adoption. Body, you've demonstrated the thesis. No guru required, only trust. Good work. EM, no threats, no anger, just approval. I stared at the screen until the words lost meaning and became shapes. Somewhere in my body, an old reflex wanted to answer him, to argue, to prove I wasn't part of his demonstration. Hoshino's voice, real voice in memory, cut through. Do not hide in fixing. I closed the laptop. Noah watched me. You okay? He asked. I almost laughed at the inadequacy of the question, then decided not to be cruel. I'm not sure, I said. Tess leaned against the doorframe. He thinks he won, she said. Lin May, quieter. He thinks everything is his experiment. Jun spoke from the love seat as if continuing a thought from days ago. Soft voice, she said. Knife. I nodded once. Mercer's calm was not gentleness. It was certainty without accountability. He believed outcomes justified methods. He believed humans were pattern machines that needed guidance. He believed he could improve the world by reducing its noise. And the most unsettling part was that he wasn't wrong about the pain. People are exhausted, they are lonely, they are overloaded with information and underfed with meaning. The market sells them products. The internet sells them identity. Politics sells them enemies. Cults sell them relief. Mercer was selling the same thing with better branding. What we did tonight didn't stop him. It didn't dismantle Harborlight. It didn't delete Kithera's servers or unbuild the dashboards. But it did something else. It broke the easiest path. It proved that my refusal could not be converted into a stable icon. It made my image unreliable as a seal. It made the necessary skeptic an awkward mythology instead of a clean product. Mercer wanted clean adoption. We gave him friction. Friction is not victory. It's what keeps machines from running at full speed. Tess walked over and picked up the old sign we'd made months ago for the office window, the one that used to read, The Cult Detective, Recovering Lost Minds. She stared at it, then looked at me. You keeping that? She asked. I stared at the words. Recovering lost minds. It sounded noble. It also sounded like I owned something I didn't. No, I said. Tess nodded once, satisfied. Good, she said, because that sign is a cult in 2 lines. Lin May's mouth moved slightly. She's right, she said. Noah didn't speak. He just watched me, waiting. I took the sign from Tess and set it face down on the floor. What now? Tess asked. The question had weight, not because we needed a new case, because we needed a new structure. I thought of all the people we'd pulled out, Phoebe, the missing wife, the death rehearsal participants, the sleepless volunteers, the marked rebirth donors, the women whose language had been thinned, Elliot, Tess. I thought of how each case had tried to turn me into something: savior, judge, icon, enemy. And now Skepsis had tried to turn me into a symbol of skepticism itself. You don't need a guru to start a cult. You just need someone people trust. If that was true, and it was, then my job wasn't to accumulate trust. It was to distribute power away from myself. I'm changing how we work, I said. Noah nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as if he'd been hoping for that sentence. Lin May's eyes sharpened. Tess crossed her arms. Say more, Tess said. First, I said, we stop branding ourselves around me. No cult detective, no hero narrative. We're an office, a team. Tess nodded. Lin May looked relieved. Noah stayed still. Second, I continued, we build an exit practice, not just investigations, aftercare, legal help, trauma-informed therapists, language recovery, financial reconstruction. We stop pretending the case ends when someone leaves. Noah's gaze softened. Good, he said quietly. Third, I said, we publish our methods, not as doctrine, but as tools. Open enough that no one can claim it's secret, and clear enough that people can use it without worship. Lin May nodded. Transparency removes aura, she said. Tess added, and it makes it harder to sell with something like approval. Fourth, I said, we stop appointing ourselves as arbiters of belief. We focus on coercion, on consent, on harm, not on whether someone's spirituality is true. John whispered, yes. And fifth, I said, we take breaks? Tess stared. That's your big reform, she asked. No, I said, it's your big survival. Noah's voice was quiet. Cults feed on exhaustion, he said. Exactly, I replied. If we're tired, we become the very thing we fight. We start wanting clean answers. We start wanting control. Tess exhaled. Fine, she said. But I'm still allowed to hate Mercer. Yes, I said. Hatred is honest sometimes. Just don't let it become your job description. Tess rolled her eyes. You're turning into a therapist, she said. No, I replied. I'm turning into someone who doesn't want to be worshipped. Lin May closed her laptop. That, she said, is the most radical thing you've said in months. Noah looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, your teacher would approve. John whispered, he remove. I nodded once. Dusk. That evening I took Second Silence out alone, not to escape, not to think I could outrun Mercer on water, just to let my nervous system relearn what it feels like to exist without a dashboard. The bay was calm in the late light. The city across the water looked like a photograph someone had overexposed, buildings washed in gold, edges soft. A ferry moved in the distance, indifferent to my private philosophy. I sailed without hurry, letting the wind decide the angle. I watched the water change color as the sun lowered, steel to amber to something almost black. I thought about appointment again. In Zen, nobody appoints you to see clearly. Seeing happens when you stop bargaining. In intelligence work, appointment is a badge. In cults, appointment is a collar. In philanthropy, appointment is a grant. Mercer wanted to appoint humanity into obedience and call it health. He wanted to appoint me into legitimacy and call it ethics. I didn't have the power to stop his machine entirely. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I had learned something that felt like a real ending, even if it wasn't a conclusion. You can dismantle a cult and still leave the hunger intact. Or you can address the hunger without becoming its new supplier. The wind shifted. The sail adjusted. The boat leaned slightly, then found balance. On the water, balance isn't a moral achievement. It's physics. The sun slipped lower, touching the horizon. I didn't feel redeemed. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like a detective who'd solved the final case. I felt like a man who had decided again to keep his hands open. No conclusions. Just water and wind.